Hi everyone, my name's PK, and here I have Frank Matina from Melbourne. Himself and his wife, they have bought 7 properties in under 10 years, starting from the age of 21. And in this episode, we'll sort of just go into like the nitty-gritty of like maybe where they bought their biggest mistakes, why they bought in those locations, why they even started property, was it worth it? Like everything like that, because as I was saying to Frank before, I really feel a lot of people don't invest because they're so afraid of the unknown. And so what I did on my Facebook group was like I posted a post that said anyone who wants to share their property journey, whether it's successful or not, I'm just trying to bring like raw, authentic property investor stories. Frank has nothing to sell you. He's not a buyer's agent, a course creator, a mortgage broker, or anything like that. These are just real stories that you don't really hear from other places, because most people that are interviewed in property circles, they sort of have an agenda, right, including me. So this is like just straight from the horse's mouth. And if there's anyone watching that is like, oh, I don't know if property is for me, or I don't know how to take the next step, then this episode will be super valuable. So thank you so much, Frank, for volunteering and making time.
No, the pleasure's mine. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start from the start. Obviously, at the headline level, buying your first property at 21 and with your wife, 7 properties before you turn 30 years old. Like that all sounds great, but I'm sure there's so much to unpack and like things that went wrong, things that went right. But let's just start from the start. Like I know I also bought my first property at 21, and I thought I was kind of ahead of the game, but apparently not. Like, why did you get into it at such an early age?
I'm not entirely sure what drew me to property, to be quite honest. I just knew I had to save money, and I just knew long term that you can't save to wealth. I just intuitively knew. I'm not sure what it was. I wasn't really that educated or anything like that. It's just I knew that I saved a bit of money. I need to invest it somewhere, and I didn't really know much about stocks and stuff like that at the time. I knew a bit about property, but just really it was just a place to put my money. So I hope that will grow.
Yeah. So like, but like 21 is like most 21-year-olds are like, they're thinking about going to Europe for like a gap year, or they're like getting an apprenticeship, or they're just partying, or even if they're like really academic and money orientated, they're not really thinking about investing. They're thinking about like hustling and getting up the career ladder. Did your parents kind of inspire you into property, or was it like, I don't know, a family friend, or like where did this idea come from?
I think initially my parents did dabble in a little bit of property investing and developing, just a little bit. But they never really pushed me into property or anything investing wise. You just work hard, save your money, and then when you want or when you're ready, buy property. So yeah, I just thought, you know what, I could feel it, I could see it. I liked the look of it, and I just bought a property at the time.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so you're in Melbourne. Were you in Melbourne back then as well? Is it in Melbourne, the first one?
Yeah, the first property is in Caroline Springs, which is western suburbs of Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did that, like, Caroline Springs would have been like it kind of in the middle of nowhere back then? I don't know if that's a fair statement, but
Yeah, it was an up and coming suburb, I would say. It
yeah.
wasn't a low demographic by any means, like there's
Mhm.
worse suburbs around, but it's not a great suburb as well, but especially back then.
Right. And how's it? I don't know how closely you track your properties. I mean, all of Melbourne has done really well, as all of Australia, but what did you buy it for? Do you remember? And do you know what it's worth at the
Yeah,
moment?
yeah, sure. I really do like numbers, so I do remember numbers quite
Yeah.
often. But I did buy that property for $360,000.
Okay.
And I had a deposit at the time for roughly about 65.
65. And
Yeah.
so like, sorry if this is too personal, but I know
Okay.
that as I ask these questions, the audience will be like, thinking of questions. So like, where does a 21-year-old get? I don't think I had 65,000 by myself at 21. Where does a 21-year-old get that much money?
Yeah, look, I really do just love to work, right? I mean, I remember my first day, my first job was 14 and 9 months. It was at Red Rooster.
Yeah,
Like
nice.
whenever I could get money, I would work. It didn't really matter. I've done dishwashing, I've done, truck washing, I've done it. But it didn't really matter to me. I knew what I needed to do was accumulate enough money for a house deposit as soon as possible. So from, yeah, 14, 9 months to 21, which is what it took me.
Right. And you're still hustling because before you were telling me how you're a gym owner, you're a warehouse manager, and you're also a dog breeder, and of course your wife's a teacher. So you got a lot sort of going on, right?
Yeah, we're busy. I like to keep busy. I do like to
Yeah.
keep busy. I like to keep it fun and different variables as well. And yeah, just keep on hustling and grinding and see what we're capable of.
Yeah, sweet, sweet. And so the first property, cool, you got it. Most people kind of tap out after the first one. I think the stats you probably know as well as I do, 70% or something like that. People don't get past the first property. What kind of made you get to the next one? Did you smell like there was something in this for the long term, or like what next?
Yeah, so when I did buy that property at 21, initially, I think about 6 months later, it did have a bit of growth. So I did go back to the bank and see if I could refinance or see something I can buy another property.
Hmm.
And they said, look, you can. And I didn't. I didn't buy another property for a good 4 years.
Oh, no way.
I didn't
Okay.
buy my second property until I was 25 years old.
Right, right.
Which was a bit of a shame because if I knew now what I knew then, kind of thing, it would have been a much better process if I brought straight away because I was capable of. But just yeah, education wasn't my thing back then.
So your first property, you were 21, was that around 2013?
And yeah, it was late 2013.
13. So after a year, the bank said, yep, you can get another one. So that would have been around late 14. And so I
Correct.
think if I'm correct, the Melbourne market was like still just going hell for leather. So you would have made a lot of money if you hadn't
Yeah.
kind of sat on your arms or hands, so to
Yeah,
speak.
I guess I knew what I needed to do. I just didn't have the right path or education at the time, and I wasn't
Mhm.
clear with the vision what I kind of needed to do and if that was the right move and if it's Melbourne again or something like that. It was just a lot of confusion, a lot of uncles and aunties and parents saying, "Yeah, babe, buy here, buy there," but you know what? In the end, I just didn't buy anywhere, so I just sat on my hands.
Yeah, well, that's a really valuable lesson for all of us because there's so much noise out the well-meaning noise out there. And if it just contradicts each other, it creates such confusion. And then you end up like doing nothing sometimes. And obviously you regret it. But nonetheless, you powered through. So what kind of got you to then consider your second property 5 years later?
Well, then by that time, I probably had a little bit more savings again. I was in a position where, look, I had a bunch of savings, and again, I didn't know what to do with it. I could go spend it. I did enjoy my upbringing. Like I went parties and all, did all that kind of stuff and traveled, but I still was a good saver and I was a hard worker. So I had a surplus amount of money. So I
Yeah.
thought I need to educate myself a little bit more and see where we're going to buy. So that's what I did. So I did do some education, just self-education, just in the property market. And again, I brought another property in Melbourne, in Melton actually.
Okay. And what were the
Yeah.
numbers on that one?
So that one there we bought it for 230, sorry, 223.
Okay. And whereabouts is that located? Like geographically for
Yeah,
those people who don't
it's
know?
probably about 40 kilometers from the CBD in the western
Yeah.
suburbs again.
Western suburbs. Okay, so now you've got two kind of in that west
Yep.
area. And what did you do next?
And then I was in a bit of a sticky position where I couldn't actually borrow anymore. So with my broker at the time, he's cross-collateralized those two properties.
Right.
So it's a little bit stuck. So for probably 12 to 18 months, I actually sat on those two properties and just trying to find out situations where I could just move them or find a way to buy another property or two. Because by that time, I had a clear path where I wanted to buy a property. I wanted to buy a lot of property. I just didn't.
And so I assume that wasn't like a conscious or intentional decision from you to cross collateralize those two properties. It was just the broker kind of did it on their own whim, or did you
Yeah,
really
look,
want them to do that?
I didn't even know what cross-collateralized meant back then
Yeah.
when that happened. I just found out when I went to another broker and he kind of said, well, this is your situation and we kind of need to do this for you to accumulate another property.
Right, right. So for those of you who don't know, cross-collateralization means where you basically use the first property as collateral or security for the debt or for the mortgage or for the loan for the second property. And what can happen is if you continue to do that, becomes a bit of a house of cards. If one property doesn't perform or drops in value, of course, it shouldn't really happen over the long term, but if something tragic happens, then the bank is actually able to access all of your properties. So it's different from just having all of your properties with the same bank. You can actually have 5 properties with the same bank, which I did at one point, all not cross-collateralized. But it's oftentimes brokers, especially if they're not sort of investment savvy, right, Frank? They don't really care
Right.
about this sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, whatever's going to make it easier to write the loan at the time. And so I think as property investors, we really need to be mindful. And did you use a mortgage broker for every property? And if you did, like, did you intentionally from this point on use like an investment savvy broker, or how did you get your lending?
Yeah, so initially the first property was just with a CBA bank, just went straight to the bank. And then I had a friend's friend, broker, etc., etc. So I contacted him and he said, look, you can buy this property, but like I didn't know about the cross collateralization.
Hmm.
But I went to him at the time. So then later on, again, I did some just self education and realized, hey, my properties are cross collateralized
Yeah.
and I need to find a good broker where I can actually just find a situation or a path, a clear path to where I can get myself out of this
Hmm.
and just conquer my goals.
Cool. So that's what you did, I assume, and that's what
Yeah,
led you
and
to your
that's what I
third?
did. Yeah, that's what I did. I did find my broker, Michael Zar. And again, look, it's just one of those things where I had a look at what he's done and I liked it. And I go, okay, this guy knows about property.
Yeah.
This is what his bread and butter is, and just want to like get mentored basically by him.
Yeah, he's a great guy for anyone who doesn't
You know him, do
know as
you?
well. He's a fantastic. I think just
Yeah,
as a human being as well, he's a
he's
he's a
awesome.
he's a
He's
solid
always got
person.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so where did you buy your third property, and like what were the details of that?
Sure. So by that time there, I had some equity in the Caroline Springs and the Melton property. So we extracted the equity from that and went to another bank with that money there, and we brought in Queensland, Brisbane.
Okay. So you're still in Melbourne. Did you buy like remotely, like sight unseen, or did you use a buyer's agent, or did you catch flights? Talk me through that process.
Yeah, so I brought the site unseen. I did a build and pest. I got a real estate agent to go through. I got a property manager to go through, and just knowledge of my broker as well, which
Hmm.
just guided and mentored me through the process of buying remotely.
Hmm.
Was a lot more easier for me.
Right.
So I didn't catch no flights. I didn't get no buyer's agent as well.
Okay. And given that you had a connection with Michael, I would assume this is in the Logan area.
Yeah, yeah, in the Logan area. Yeah.
Okay. And it would have like this would have been what,
2000,
2021?
earlier, 2018.
Oh, sorry. Okay, we're still way back then. All
Yep.
right. I mean, so it would have been kind of flat in terms of performance for the
Yeah.
next 2 or 3 years, but then the COVID boom, it went up like 50% or something, right?
Yeah. So I brought two properties in Brisbane there in the
Uh-huh.
Logan, one in Crestmead, one in Kingston.
Okay.
I bought both of those for 280.
280. Yeah, I mean, we were buying in, not myself personally, but clients were buying in Crestmead around 2021, early, I want to say, more for like low 300s. And yeah,
Yep.
those have done really well. We never bought in Kingston. How was your experience? And this is kind of hopefully educational because Kingston is quite a lower socio-demographic suburb. There are a lot of landlords there as well versus owner-occupier properties. And that's always kind of like the sticking point with me in terms of buying in some areas. Of course, you might, just evade all issues altogether, or you could have a lot of issues with people trashing the place, not paying rent, et cetera, et cetera. What's been your experience with tenants to date?
Look, I've had the same tenant in the Crestmead one since purchase,
Hmm.
and which they've been lovely. So they've been really good. They take good care of the property. And in terms of the Kingston property, you're right. There is a difference in demographic, even though they're not far apart from each other, probably like 5 to 10 minutes.
Hmm.
So unfortunately, yes, you're right. A lot of landlords, so that means a lot of renters, and that means a lower demographic. But touch wood, I've had good tenants or good-ish tenants
Yeah.
where they haven't really trashed the property too much. Could be a little bit like you have to kick them out because they haven't been paying or stuff like that. But yeah, in terms of damage to the property, I've had good luck. But that also comes down to my property managers just vetting the applicants a lot more better and stuff like that.
Yeah. And how much like time do you actually spend on a, I don't know, monthly or yearly basis like kind of dealing with property managers? Because I mean, we haven't got to your fifth property yet, but yourself, you've got five. Is it like really time consuming? Because you're a pretty busy guy otherwise.
Not really. No, not really. The property managers know when they contact me, it must be something that's going to be valuable to my time, I guess.
Yeah,
Where the little nitty-gritty stuff, they will just work out on my behalf, just because I've given them access and clear direction of what I kind of want.
sure, sure.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
not, to be honest, not really much time, if anything, probably a couple hours, maybe 4 to 6 hours a month looking at my properties.
Yeah, so you got those two in Melbourne and then the two in Brisbane. And I think like a lot of people, Frank, I don't know if you heard it in your friends and stuff, but a lot of people are like, oh, hey, I don't want to buy somewhere that's really far away from me, like interstate or another city or town, because I want to be able to drive past my property. I want to be able to touch it, I feel it. I want to be able to like look at it if I want to. They're a bit concerned that property managers can take them for a ride in terms of maintenance costs if something goes wrong, like plumbing or electricians or these sorts of people. And they're like, oh, I could probably do a better job of just maintaining it myself. If it was in my backyard, so to
Yeah.
speak. So like, what are your thoughts on like these types of points? Like honestly speaking.
Look, I look at property as a numbers game, I guess. It shouldn't be too emotionally invested. Sure, there's a gut feel about certain properties,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, it's all numbers for me. If the numbers make sense, well, then it kind of makes sense to make that deal. But in terms of having problems with electricians and trades and all that kind of stuff, just get multiple quotes. Yeah, I just get a lot of quotes, and that's probably where I spend my time mainly. Just getting
Hmm.
more quotes, or I get the manager to get more quotes, and that way I can vet who's trying to take me for a ride and who isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right. So you've had fairly good experiences so far with those four properties. Where did you buy your fifth one?
Then I had probably one more to go just because of just lending issues and restrictions.
Sure.
So I brought in Corio, so Geelong Corio.
Correct. Oh, good choice. And when was that?
That was in 2020.
2020. So how much did you buy that for, and what was the kind
I
of
brought
rent?
that for 400.
Yeah.
What was the second question? Sorry.
And what was the kind of rent that you're getting for
Oh
that?
yeah, the rent at the time was probably about 330, and I brought that for 400. So it was more of a neutral kind of cash flow property back then. Now it's
Yeah.
probably not. But
Yeah.
yeah, I brought it for 400. That property there is probably worth, I don't know, 550 now or
Yeah.
so.
And what is like, you speak about neutral or, may not be neutral anymore. What are your thoughts? Because a lot of people are like, oh, hey, lots of property investors have to sell their properties because they didn't see these interest rates coming, as in the interest rate rises. You've obviously been mostly in the market in the last, like, since 2018, like four of your properties
Yep.
were around since the last 4 or 5 years. Is it hurting? Like, are the interest rate rises really hurting for you? Because you're like officially, I don't know what the stats are, but you're like officially top 5% of property investors according to number of properties anyway in Australia. Are you like contemplating selling the properties, or are they still kind of paying for themselves? Just talk me through that.
Yeah, I kind of got lucky. I wouldn't even call it lucky. I did it intentionally, I guess, where I had a couple of properties in the western suburbs where they were neutral, but then I went to Logan to get that passive, just positive passive cash flow.
Yeah.
And then I went back to a neutral property. So I guess, look, at the moment, it's costing me money, but it isn't outweighing the pros and cons of selling. For example, I have no intention to sell just yet. If I did sell, then it would just be purposely to put the money somewhere else into another property or something like that.
Right. So it's obviously had a return on investment. Do you have a spreadsheet, or do you know how many thousands of dollars it's costing you at a portfolio level? Like five properties is costing me
Yeah,
$5,000 a year to hold, or do you know
yeah.
anything like that?
I think when you get a few properties, it's a good idea to make sure you know the numbers on
Hmm.
terms of how much it actually is costing you. And look, we did the numbers probably earlier this year. It was probably around the 25 to 30K net negative.
Wow.
But then you get some of the money back at tax time, so it kind of
Right.
evened out. So
Right.
I thought, just if it's cost me in the end $15,000 to hold the portfolio, which is growing at a rate of 7 to 10%, it's
Uh-huh.
not a bad deal.
And so how much do you think you have built equity in that portfolio? So like, add up all of the purchase prices of the five properties versus the current valuation, how much is it, like 1 million, 2 million, 3? Do you have a sense of
Sure, I
that?
reckon we've probably got about $1.1 million of equity into the properties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
the portfolio is probably sitting about two and a half at the moment, 2.5 mil.
Okay. And about 1.5 million of equity.
Correct.
Okay. So your LVR or your total debt ratio is what, like 50%-ish?
Yeah, 55, I think we calculated last time.
Okay, interesting. That's just kind of thinking out loud. I'm kind of surprised that it's costing you around 25,000 dollars a year to hold, to be honest, because
It wasn't, and then now it's actually turned over to principal and interest.
oh, that's the
Which
reason.
which is I
Okay.
have the opportunity to just go back to interest only. Some
Yeah.
of them I do, some of them I don't. But
Yeah.
I don't mind. Look, we have to pay them down at some point, so we are paying them down at this point. Yeah.
Right. And is that your strategy? Just kind of forever now pay P&I to then ultimately in the future own them outright?
Not really. I want to sell one or two to then pay down some of that debt, and then there'll be more cash flow coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah. Ultimately, what we want to do is maybe sell one or two properties just to get a bigger PPOR.
Mm-hmm.
But that's probably the goal at the moment, just focusing on the next bigger property for our forever home.
Got it. Got it. So you're actually rent vesting this whole time.
No, we're staying at Elisa's, my wife's property.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So maybe let's just touch on her property. So I think you're saying that she has two. Is the one that you're living in the first one, or is that over on top of the other two investments?
Yeah, so the one that we're currently living in is in also western suburbs of Melbourne,
Okay.
Antrim. It was off a plan property, so it's a little townhouse, a cute little townhouse in Antrim.
Right, right.
And
Um,
she brought that before she was with me, so it's got some equity and all that kind of stuff in
Fantastic. And then did you kind of inspire her to
there.
get her like second investment property? Is that how it
Yeah,
went?
well, look, she did really well, to be honest. She brought that at 20 or 21. And then again, she was in a similar situation like I was, and she goes, I've got a bunch of savings. I just
Yeah,
don't know what to do with it.
yeah.
And I, at the time, couldn't borrow no more. So I'm like, I know exactly what to do with it. So we went and bought another property.
And she listened to
Um,
you.
yeah, no, she's very, very good like that. Look, she's seen my track record. She's seen how little success I've had with my property in that. So she goes, you
Yeah,
know what? Look, you kind of know what you're doing there.
yeah.
What should I do? Mentor me through it. So that's what we did. So we bought a property in Perth.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, I'm keen to hear. Like, where did you buy? What did you buy it for?
Yeah, so we brought in Perth in the Mandurah estate. It's called Greenfields.
Yep, I know the suburb very well. And was that
Yep.
recently?
That was in 2021.
Oh, perfect, perfect timing. Like that was, I feel that was quite early for Perth almost. Like I feel that a lot of people based on Facebook groups or YouTube or whatever have got into Perth like in 2022 late or mid, and then obviously in 2023 right now the market is doing really well. So you're kind of almost ahead of the pack. What kind of gave you that foresight to jump all the way to the other side of Australia as opposed to just like Admore and Queensland or closer to where you live in Melbourne, as in Adelaide and just on the south side of Australia? Why go all the way to Perth?
Yeah, 'cause I've seen a similar, I guess, a similar model of what happened to Logan, where it
Hmm.
was low demographic, didn't grow for a very, very long time, but it was high yielding. Like these properties were renting out 500 per week for a four bedder at 300K. So
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, even if it doesn't grow, at least we still got the yield. So at least the cash flow is really, really good.
yeah. Okay, makes sense. And how much has that gone up in the last couple of years?
In within the 2 years, I think it's gone up to about 480, and we brought it for four. So we bought it for 340.
340. Okay, so $140,000 of growth. That's about what, 30%-ish, something like
Yeah,
that. That's
yeah,
that's pretty
yeah.
decent.
And it's cash flowing like between 5 to 10K per year.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
That's
it's
beautiful.
good.
And that's like during the time when interest rates have gone up. So this is like counter cyclical. Fantastic. I think that is that probably your best deal out of all of them?
Look, I thought if I had five of those, that'd be nice.
Yeah, that's for sure. You and me both. No, that's amazing. And so like what structures have you bought these properties? Is it all under your name or trusts, or like how have you gone about that?
No, we just went nice and simple. Like I brought the properties under my name, and she brought the properties under her name, and just really nice and simple. I don't know too much about in terms of tax, pros and cons in buying in companies and trusts and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
I just never went into it. So I thought, you know what, the simplest way, is just buying in your own name for the moment.
Yeah, sweet. And so you've been in like in our Facebook group for a while, I think now. You probably, I don't know how much time you spend looking at other people's questions or even posting your own questions. You kind of probably have a sense though, right, of like what people struggle with the most or the types of questions people ask in the Facebook group. And a lot of times, do you have I don't know, like some advice or multiple pieces of advice for folks who are like, hey, I want to achieve similar types of results, but maybe even better, having learnt off Frank now. What kind of advice could you give to folks?
Yeah, I do see a lot of questions and that. I think most of them are regarding just how much you can borrow and what properties you should buy.
Hmm.
And I think you got to start with a goal, and the goal's got to be situated which properties are the best for that goal. There's no point just look. The first couple of properties I bought was just pretty much just a wing-in kind of purchase.
Yeah.
Then later on, it was strategic. So I think if you start from the start where you have good education, a good path, a clear path, direction, and then have the best help possible, where you've got the best broker or the best broker for you at least, a good accountant. I think a good accountant makes sense as well, and
Hmm.
just a good community to help you around.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I just want to be clear as well. Like Frank is not a client of mine. Like this is just an honest conversation. I just want to pick up on the your ability or practical implementation methods to buy in Perth, just so anyone can follow if they want to. Was it the same thing? Like you just got a few property managers to inspect the home and Bob's your uncle kind of thing, or was there more to
Yeah,
it?
yeah, so we inspected a few properties. At that time, I could tell the market was heating up or was going to heat up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just like a quick little indication. A lot of the properties that were new on the realestate.com was going under offer really quick. So I
Right.
knew, okay, it's coming. The yields there, the population's coming, the demand's there. So okay, now it's going to start heating up. So yeah, and it's just the same model. Just getting a few real estate agents in, managers in. I did a building and pest. The numbers made sense, and we just purchased.
And how are you able to build trust in the agents or the property managers that they're actually telling you the right thing? Like maybe there's a massive hole in the wall, or maybe it's like a really old property, but they're just kind of making a story so that you'll buy it and then they get the property management for the next 10 years or they
Yeah,
make the sale. Like how did you overcome? I don't know if that stuff goes through your head a lot or not, but how did you overcome that?
yeah, for sure. I really actually I stay away from the real estate agent. I
Uh-huh.
actually go to the manager. So if I have a particular person I want the property to be managed by, I rather send them in. They do a full video for me throughout the whole house, literally every single room, every single nook and cranny.
Yeah.
And then they give me a full like just detail, I guess, explanation of what the property is. And then at the end of the day, they wouldn't like advise me to buy a shit property because they're going to be managing it.
Yeah.
They know what the property is going to expect. They know that they're going to be causing headaches anyway if they do advise me to buy it. So most of the time they are quite honest. Not so much real estate agents unless you're
Mhm.
really good, got a good relationship with them, but
Yeah.
more so the managers. I believe I rely on the managers more.
Right. It's a really interesting story because it's like it was almost like a false start. Like you kind of did really well actually in your first property, but then you kind of didn't get into second or third gear for a while. Did you ever think about, and like this is not a loaded question, like please be honest here, but did you ever think about for your second or third or fourth or fifth property or even for your wife's properties, like hiring a buyer's agent and like just being like, okay, maybe they can do a better job than me. You know how they always say, oh, even if we just negotiate $10,000, $20,000 better than we pay for our fees. Like, did you ever contemplate that? And like, why did you end up never really using a buyer's agent?
Yeah, it's a good question. I just don't believe that I could I guess with the experience that I have, it's just like I'd rather just do it myself. That way I know I can do it again and
Mhm.
just rinse and repeat. If I tell someone to do the work, then I can't really rinse and repeat that with a unless I'm paying big money. To pay
Yeah,
15 to 20K each time, it doesn't make sense if you're buying a lot of property.
right. Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. That's very logical. Obviously, everyone knows I'm not against buyer's agents, but I genuinely think most of them just do a really lousy job, and the client doesn't actually know that it's a lousy job until years and years later. But it's good to just hear from someone who has no sort of skin in the game, just honest advice and honest thoughts on
Yeah,
that
I
topic.
just rather, you get educated, and that way that you can just rinse and repeat. And at least I have the control where, I made the mistake, not someone else made the mistake. And then I
Yeah.
blame everything on them. It's just one
Yeah.
of the things where what, I did this. It was either good or bad. Either way, I did this.
Yeah, it's a good feel, especially if you do actually do a good job. Like you did,
Thank
you
you.
got a lot of self-education, right? Like you didn't do my course or anything like that, but from I assume diverse sources, you actually figured out at least enough to be able to take action. And that's really, I think the main thing. It's like not trying to perfect something, it's just taking the next step. Because if you just keep taking the next step, the next step, the next step, you land yourself at 31 years of age with like seven properties between yourself and your wife. And that's more than like what 98% of Australians or something. So I think that's
Yeah, and
something to
look,
be
it's
proud of.
obviously, as you will know, you've got property. It's not always an easy path. Like I've had a garage burnt down. Yeah,
Oh
just
well.
there's a couple
Right.
little bumps and corners, but I mean that's part of the game, and just making sure that you're organized and prepared for those kind of stuff. I guess it's just just that's what you got to do. It's just part of the game.
That wasn't the Kingston one, was it?
No, it was actually the Crestmead one.
Oh
Like, it
really?
was completely accidental. The tenant burnt down the property accidentally,
Oh
but it
no.
was okay. Look, I had insurance, so it's okay. That was
Okay.
actually one of the scariest bits. Just
Jeez.
making sure that I did pay for the insurance.
Okay. So like so you bought your build this is actually probably good to cover this. So you bought building insurance and landlord insurance, I assume. Like who do you insure with?
At the time, it was EDM, but now I've just got all my properties under Suncorp, just because the app and all that kind of stuff just a little bit easier to keep track.
Right. And did you find that that process was like getting the claim done was simple with EDM or like was it?
Look, I reckon they were pretty good at the time. Because again, I'm remote. Like I'm in Melbourne. I didn't go to the property. I didn't go to Queensland. I didn't make sure that they're doing the fence right, doing the garage right. I just
Yeah.
relied on tradespeople. I just relied on my manager. I just relied on getting lots of quotes, lots of video, lots of images. And
Right.
again, that's probably the most stressful part of the whole property journey that I've had. Just
Yeah.
making sure that that is operating and no one's trying to rip me, and just making sure the insurance is doing what it needs to do.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
And even through that process of having to rebuild that part of that house, I assume like you still didn't actually visit it in person?
Nah, nah. I actually took the whole construct like on my hands rather than the insurance doing it. So I said I'd rather just the payout and I'll go take care of all the trades.
Okay.
Just because they'll taking too long on a couple of things, I'm just like, I'd rather just get it all done. I know that I can do it from here remotely with the
Yeah.
contacts I've already got there.
Right. Well, that kind of settles it because that's basically the worst thing that can happen to your house, right? Either it gets completely flooded or it burns down. And the fact that you still, I mean, to be honest with you, if I'm completely frank, I would have actually visited the property just for like emotional release. Be like,
Yeah.
this is my investment. But just, I mean, that settles it. You still didn't fly. So that just kind of proves that you can buy anywhere in Australia following the data and you don't actually need to be there, whether it's a purchase, whether it's duration of the property, or whether it's for if and when you sell that property. That's a really cool.
I think just having good contacts there with people that you can trust, and even the tenants were really, really good about it. So even though they did it, they were really good on helping me restore that.
And you obviously, did you keep them on after that?
Yeah, it was completely accidental. He
Yeah.
makes dog beds, and unfortunately, just one of the soldering iron fell on one of the dog beds, and these things
Oh,
happen.
okay.
But hey, I got a new garage from it, and no one was hurt.
Fair enough. And so like maybe just a couple of last questions, Frank. Obviously interest rates have risen a lot, and maybe they'll rise again, maybe once or twice or something like that. Nonetheless, there's talks of recessions. You know, there's always talks of recessions, to be honest. There's talks of cost of living going up and it continuing to go up. There's always kind of macroeconomic headwinds that us investors have to face, especially because the media kind of blows them out of proportion. Does that affect you, or how do you approach that when you're sitting on millions of dollars of debt?
Yeah, I think it's really, really easy to get stuck within the noise. There's a lot of noise, and someone that wasn't really that educated or didn't have much of an idea would be very, very confused at this point. Look, everyone knows interest rates go up
Yeah.
and interest rates go down. It's just how long are they going to stay up for? And no one has a crystal ball. But if you can look at the long term of your goal, 5 to 10 years you're in property at least, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Property is very forgiving. Like it's a very forgiving kind of vehicle that we use.
Right, right. No, that's really well said. It is forgiving. I mean, even if you make tragic errors in the first 1 or 2 years, which you shouldn't, because like you said, you
Yeah.
should get some self-education over a 20, 10, 15, 20 year period. It kind of just comes out in the wash anyway. And so what is your like kind of long-term plan? I know you did say you wanted to upgrade and build a bigger house to live in. Maybe 10, 20 years from now, are you going to plan to continue to increase the portfolio, or like why are you doing all this in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question as well. Look, I chose property, I guess now looking back, just because it has a really good way to leverage your money, where you can refinance, just stuff like that. Well, where if you put in the stock market, I couldn't really do that.
Hmm.
So I'll continue to use property as my vehicle, just because of the leverage. Because I don't have a huge wage, so it's a really good leveraging tool, which is
Hmm.
why I like it most. So
Nice.
yeah, I believe in the next 10 to 15 years, I'll still be accumulating properties. I'll still be using property as probably one of the main vehicles as wealth. And yeah, I don't see why not. I don't see why not. We're going to have ups and downs in property, but I believe no one, or I haven't heard anyone say, I wish I sold that property 20 years ago
Yeah.
or anything like that. So yeah, in 20, 30 years, you still see me buying property.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's really inspirational actually, because it just goes to show that, you don't actually need to pay professionals to get a great outcome. You don't actually need to do my course to actually just get on the ladder. Like you, of course, you might have been in a different position had you done the course. I wasn't around doing the course back when you started anyway. But I think like the key thing that I take away is just self-education. It's so important. I think there was a almost like a direct correlation in the results that you were achieving in proportion to like how educated you were becoming, right? Because with Michael and doing all that education around
Yeah.
2018, you got into Logan at about the right time, and then Perth was like just bang on right timing. So I think that's a really big takeaway that I've taken away.
Yeah. Thanks, PK. Yeah, exactly.
No, you should be really proud. And guys, hopefully this has brought you value. Like I said, there's so many amazing, amazing investors, many much more successful than myself in our Facebook group, and Frank is just one of them. And like I said, I posted on there and I asked, does anyone want to just share their real stories? And Frank very kindly put his hand up. So hopefully that's kind of just, I always say you can't be what you can't see. So when you see or at least hear the experiences of folks like Frank, you can be like, oh yeah, I'm a teacher, or I'm a dog breeder, or I'm a gym owner or whatever. I don't earn a huge income. I live in Melbourne or Sydney or wherever, but things are just too expensive here. Actually, there is a path for me. Like there is a way that I can get ahead. It's not going to happen in 6 months or 2 years, may not even happen in 5 years, but with property as a key, I guess, lucrative avenue to create wealth in Australia, which we're very lucky to have, by the way. In 10 years and 15 years, I can buy my dream home, or I can look to supplement my income so I don't have to work so hard. So it's just awesome to hear just real, like on the ground, grassroots journeys like yourself, Frank. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And hit the subscribe button, give it a like, and please do join the Facebook group. You can interact with and engage with folks like Frank. It's called Australian Property Mastery with PK. And I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again, Frank.
No worries, mate.